President Nixon has resigned in disgrace. Saigon has fallen to the communists. The country is nearing the end of a 3-year recession with average gas prices at a wallet shriveling 57 cents per gallon. Women have rejected the bra as a symbol of the patriarchy, and no one complains. And the first modern blockbuster scares America out of the water. This is The Year in Movies, 1975. Hi, I'm Jave, and I watched 37 movies from 1975.
In a row?
And I'm here to talk about the classics, the duds, and the surprises that you probably won't see in today's cinema. Now, I didn't watch all of these in the last week just to prep for this video. A few years ago, I started keeping a spreadsheet, keeping notes of all the movies I watched for my own creative purposes. But I did watch or rewatch them all fairly recently. 1975 is pretty wild. Now, there are plenty of movies here that I grew up with on cable, but 24 of these 37 were first-time watches for me. And it's interesting to see a lot of similar themes and concepts pop up again and again here. The majority of these films are about characters caught in conspiracies, dystopias, or systems that suffocate. Traditional values are being re-examined, but even the recent hippie revolution, which questioned the status quo, is itself being criticized. So let's get into it. 10 of the 37 are detective movies in one way or another. You've got your comedy version, you've got your thriller versions, you've got your French example, and your Japanese example. But 5 are straight up neo-noir detective movies, and that's pretty much my sweet spot. First there's French Connection 2. I definitely like the original better, but there's plenty in it that's interesting. Hackman's Popeye Doyle travels to Marseille, continuing his obsessive hunt for the criminal who got away in the first one. He's in a foreign city, he doesn't understand the terrain, and Scheider is no longer there as his partner. But the really striking thing is there's a long segment in the middle where Hackman is abducted and forcibly hooked on heroin, and then he has to detox from it for almost like 20 minutes. And Hackman is incredible. It has to be one of the great drug withdrawal performances out there. The problem is between that and Hackman being lost in a city where he can't really operate, the plot loses some forward motion. Things drag a bit, but it's still a recommended watch, and the ending does give the viewer a sense of completion that the original very deliberately refused.
Help me to swim, asshole!
Then there's Hustle with Burt Reynolds and Catherine Deneuve. Reynolds is a cop, and Deneuve is his hooker with a heart of gold girlfriend. He investigates the apparent suicide of a young woman, which turns out to be a murder connected to a larger conspiracy. It sounds promising, and parts of it are interesting, but it's an odd mix with some proto-80s humor that doesn't quite work. I had never seen it before, and I probably won't watch it again.
There's nothing sacred anymore, is there?
No, there isn't.
Next is Farewell My Lovely. This is another version of Raymond Chandler's pulp novel, previously adapted as Murder My Sweet in 1944. I've seen that version, I've read the book, and this is a strong take. Mitchum plays a strong Marlowe, though he's probably too old for the part. Charlotte Rampling makes for an enticing femme fatale.
Why don't you come over here and sit beside me?
If somewhat awkward May lover. And because this is 1975, we get a more realistic view of race, sex, and corruption than the Hays Code previously allowed. But what really struck me was realizing that the Naked Gun literally stole voiceover straight from this movie.
Her hair was the color of gold in old paintings. She had a full set of curves which nobody had been able to improve on.
Her hair was the color of gold in old paintings. She had a full set of curves. And the kind of legs you'd like to suck on for a day.
That alone makes this a recommend. Then there's The Drowning Pool with Paul Newman playing another private investigator, Harper, and the sequel to that eponymous movie from 1966. This one is okay. Newman is always fun to watch, and I like the way a small job blossoms into a larger and uglier conspiracy. It doesn't all come together perfectly, and most of the plot isn't exactly memorable, despite a very young Melanie Griffith coming on to the older Newman.
Don't you think I'm kinda sexy?
But my favorite detective movie of the year is Night Moves, starring Gene Hackman. More than any of the others, this movie is very self-aware, and it sets out to criticize and re-examine the detective genre itself. Hackman is a not very successful PI whose wife is cheating on him right under his nose. So when he gets the easy job to go cross-country and retrieve the runaway Melanie Griffith, he takes it not only for the income, but because it might give him a vacation from his disastrous private life. Here again, the young Griffith tries to come on to the older star, because apparently that was some 1975 subgenre. But when he tells her he's there to take her back to her mother, she doesn't take it too well.
This old pervert keeps flashing
By the middle of the movie, he's completed his job and he's back home trying to reconcile with his wife. But then the girl dies, and Hackman has to wonder, was it an accident or was it murder? There's a scene early on that I love that foretells what's going to happen in a very clever and indirect way. Hackman's got a portable chessboard, and he sets up a famous game where one player had a perfect set of moves available to him, and he could have won.
Oh, that's nice.
But he didn't see it. He played something else, and he lost.
Must have regretted it every day of his life. I know I would have.
And so now he pursues the investigation on his own, almost a new story starting. The first case was finding the girl, the second is trying to figure out what he missed. And it results in one of the most tragic and visually poetic endings of the year. I won't say Night Moves is a perfect movie. Some of the meta commentary is a bit too obvious, and some of the details of the conspiracy are a bit muddy. I've watched it several times over the years, and I still have trouble keeping track of some of the details. But if you like neo-noir, it's an absolute recommend for the year. So we've already gotten a taste for conspiracy in the detective films, but 1975 has movies where the conspiracies run much deeper than just one case or one murder. Sometimes it implicates a whole society. Let's start with two movies that use corporate violent sports to intoxicate the dystopian masses long before Arnold Schwarzenegger's Running Man ever did. Death Race 2000 and Rollerball. The first is a campy exploitation flick where cars race cross country and they get points for running over as many pedestrians as possible along the way. While I certainly can identify with these characters in moments when self-righteous jaywalkers have barred my path, the movie is pretty light and cheesy, and it's best left as background noise at a party. Still, you get a look at a young Stallone, and cheese can be fun. Rollerball is a different story. I really like this one. At one level, it plays like a sports movie with James Caan as a captain of a violent rollerblading hockey-like team where players can get maimed or killed, and it's part of the entertainment. But it's also a near-future dystopia where corporations rule the world, and the corporations themselves rely on a supercomputer that may or may not be playing with a full deck.
He's supposed to tell us where things are and what they might possibly mean.
The dystopia material is a little weird and convoluted, but it's great. The main thematic question seems to focus on man's inherent brutal nature and how reason can and should suppress it. We see that brutal nature not only in the rollerball game itself, but in some of the drunken antics from elite partygoers who decide to flamethrow some trees for fun. But the movie is also about the suppression of the individual in favor of the collective. Caan has led his team to a record-setting winning streak, and now his corporate bosses want him to retire because no individual can be seen to be too powerful or special. There's a lot of Brave New World in here, and the ending is similar to Huxley's in that the individual's rebellion against the collective isn't a clear-cut rational win. Next, Race with the Devil and A Boy and His Dog both fit into this category. But I'm going to put a pin in them and instead move on to The Stepford Wives.
I like to watch women doing little domestic chores.
This is a sci-fi horror thriller that, yes, has a darkly humorous satire playing underneath it, but it's played with total seriousness. Catherine Ross is a wife and mother whose family has moved from the city to the idyllic suburban town called Stepford. As she settles in, she notices that many of the women are more domestic and submissive than her friends back home.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm happy.
But what starts as discomfort in a new environment soon becomes a fear that the women around her have been replaced by mindless robots and that she might be the next victim. This is a thriller in the original sense of the term, a woman in peril. And she's enmeshed in a conspiracy that doesn't just include her town and neighbors, but may involve her husband as well.
So what are you talking about, Joanna?
Why can't you understand? Her kitchen was sparkling.
Yeah, so you said.
She stumbled into the creation of a patriarchal dystopia where women are turned into eternally attractive and submissive tools for their husband's comfort and desire.
If you're going to tell me you don't like this dress, I'm sticking my head right in the oven.
And it's creepy. There's a definite connection here to the invasion of the body snatchers where the individual is taken over and replaced. And that's truly unsettling. And the scene where Ross is confronted with her Stepford doppelganger, it gives me real goosebumps. Definitely a recommend.
We'll break down the security there.
The most famous conspiracy movie of the year goes to 3 Days of the Condor, and for good reason. Robert Redford plays a low-rung, bookish CIA analyst whose office is hit while he's away at lunch. The opening sequence is brutal and well executed. Redford comes back, finds the bodies, and suddenly he has no idea who to trust. It's a great example of that other kind of classic thriller, the innocent everyman on the run. There are two standout details to mention. The first is a sequence in the middle where Redford runs into Max von Sydow, the man who's been hired to kill him. Redford doesn't know that for sure, but he has his suspicions. And it all plays out in an elevator with little dialogue and little music.
This is second floor. I do it all the time.
And it's just this unbearably tense feeling that this polite older man might murder him any second. I love it. The second is Redford's romance for Faye Dunaway, which starts as an abduction. Now, you'd never see this kind of thing in a contemporary film, but I think it works here. He forces her back to her apartment and he ties her up so he can finally get some sleep and think straight. She's an unwilling hostage, but somehow, over the course of the second act, she not only starts to help him, but she goes to bed with him, even as her fiancé waits for her in an out-of-state ski lodge. I mean, it's Robert Redford. He can't be all bad, right? Once Redford finally discovers why he's being chased and who's behind the conspiracy, I find it a little hokey. Unfortunately, that's common with a lot of these stories. The big reveal is rarely as satisfying as the struggle to uncover it. But the movie has a very solid ending.
It didn't have to end this way.
Of course it did.
It gives just enough hope to assume that Redford's won, but it's ambiguous enough to suggest doubt. And I love the freeze frame at the end. Highly, highly recommend. 1975 is pretty sparse in the comedy department, at least in the movies I watched. Some of the best humor is dark and under the surface, like in Stepford Wives, or to some extent in Dog Day Afternoon, which I haven't mentioned yet. And yes, the exploitation flicks like Death Race 2000 and A Boy and His Dog are, dark comedies. Then there's the most famous horror comedy musical of the decade, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Incredibly, this was a recent first-time watch for me. What can I tell you? The music is great. The concept is really well executed. I was surprised by how much it riffs on classic Hammer horror tropes, and I was also surprised by the rather downbeat ending. But it's not my kind of movie. Then there's Robert Altman's Nashville. The first out-and-out comedy to mention is The Return of the Pink Panther, the third outing of Peter Sellers' farcical detective series. It's a little too slapstick for me, and it also feels like it belongs to a different era, like the early 60s where the first two movies were made. But there is a moment when Sellers finds his assistant Kato hiding in a refrigerator during a training exercise that is pretty hilarious. Then there's Shampoo, starring Warren Beatty, Julie Christie, and Goldie Hawn. This was another first-time watch for me, and it's fun. Beatty is a popular LA hairstylist who has his pick of all the attractive and often older, wealthy female clientele.
You're a genius.
It takes place in 1968, so it's a bit of a mini period piece, and it's set against the presidential election where every viewer knows that Nixon is going to win and that he will eventually resign in disgrace. The movie seems to be a semi-screwball satirical criticism of the free-spirited, free-loved 60s, which can ultimately only lead nowhere.
I don't anybody for money, I do it for fun.
Beatty ends up alone, Christie rejects love to marry the older rich guy, and Hawn is the only one who seems to grow and move on. It's pretty good. But my favorite comedy of the year, and now I think my favorite Woody Allen comedy period, is Love and Death. It takes place in Russia during the Napoleonic Wars. War and Peace, get it? And the overarching plot is Woody being drafted into the army while also pursuing his unrequited love for his cousin, twice-removed Diane Keaton.
You think I was made in God's image? Take a look at me. You think he wears glasses?
Not with those frames.
The lines are laugh out loud every few seconds, full of puns, reversals, and unexpected connections.
Skin, it is so beautiful. Yes, I know. It covers my whole body.
It constantly references life's big questions like God, morality,
non-existence, black emptiness.
And it's just the perfect mix of high and lowbrow that I love.
What'd you say?
Oh, I was just planning my future.
Here again, for me, the best horror is found in movies that straddle the genre line, like The Stepford Wives or Jaws, which we'll get to later.
Behold!
The Devil's Reign is so wild and cheesy. William Shatner and Tom Skerritt get caught up in some Satanist cult plot, and I really have no idea what's going on for most of the movie. Ernest Borgnine is trying to get some magic book or something. And look, I love his makeup.
Oh, deathless one.
And the low-budget practical effects for the melting cultists are effective and rather revolting. But But there's literally 10 full minutes of melting cultists in an 86-minute movie, and I'm sorry, but that's just too much melting. Then I tried to expand my horizons with the erotic Dutch horror exploitation flick, My Nights with Susan, Sandra, Olga, and Julie. This was bad. There's really no theme or plot or rationale to be found here. Just some bloodthirsty naked women looking for a good time. Finally, we come to Shivers, directed by David Cronenberg. It's low budget, but it's visceral and disturbing. It all takes place in a large apartment building where parasites turn people into lust-driven, violent hosts. These slug-like things pretty much turn the host's reptilian brain up to 11, so the movie creates a strong connection between sex, violence, and gore. I have to say I've dabbled with similar ideas in some of my own creative work, so I appreciate the movie's goal and execution. But I'm a bit squeamish when it comes to Cronenberg's body horror, so I can't really say it was enjoyable. I've already highlighted a number of first-time watches in the discussion so far, but now I want to mention a few notable films that don't fit in some of the previous categories. First, there's A Boy and His Dog, one of the discoveries of the year. I mean, it is wild.
May I have a chicken salad, please?
But I'm going to save that discussion for an upcoming and ongoing companion series, Guys Night In. Next, we come to that other Satanist movie of the year, Race with the Devil. Now, this is more a thriller than a horror film. Peter Fonda and Warren Oates are on a road trip with their wives in a state-of-the-art mobile home. One night they stop at an out-of-the-way wilderness and they see a group in the distance dancing around a fire. And then some clothes start coming off and they're starting to get interested.
Poor little bunnies running around over there.
And then a creepy guy in a mask stabs a naked woman in some kind of ritualistic murder. And it's like, oh shit. They pile into the RV and they make for the highway and they report the incident to the sheriff as soon as they can. But everything is not as it seems, and they and we start to believe that there's some conspiracy to cover it up. And pretty soon they're being pursued and it's all pretty effective. The further they get away from the town, it gets a little harder to believe that the conspiracy extends that far. So some of the tension drops in the middle. But then you get a really fun climax where there's a car chase and smash up with the mobile home, and it looks like the two couples might actually escape. Almost.
Come on, fight!
Then I have to bring up Mandingo. This may be the greatest indictment against slavery and racism ever put to film. We've noted a lot of conspiracies in the movies this year, but here we have something larger than conspiracy. It's an entire society and institution infected with corruption. And we see that corruption eat away at the slave-owning family at the center of the movie. The plantation exterior is shabby, the interiors are dark and dirty, and the two siblings are weak, mean, and poisoned by the world that they've inherited. The broad plot involves the son training one of his large slaves to become a bare-knuckle boxer, the Mandingo of the title. And yes, this is certainly one of the films that Tarantino is referencing in Django Unchained. But there's very little here that I'd call entertaining. It's harsh and ugly, and it results in one of the most brutal endings of the year. But probably my favorite discovery of the year is The Great Waldo Pepper, starring Robert Redford as a barnstormer and stunt pilot. It has adventure, charm, and romance. But by romance, I don't mean love and courtship. I'm talking about the display of daring individuals trying to do thrilling feats that no one else can or is willing to do. But the movie also shows that that daring has a cost. This is a nostalgic view of the daring individual from the perspective of a more cautious, corporatized age. Redford wants to live in a world where a man can survive by skill and nerve, but America is changing and barnstorming is dying. By the end, he's working in film as a stunt pilot, turning old heroic legends into movie spectacle for the masses. Okay, we've almost reached my top 5 movies of the year, but first, some trademark TYIM awards you'll only find here. Best Non-Human and Support Role goes to
The Dog Inn, A Boy and His Dog.
The Most Evil Pair of Wanton Women in a Dutch Horror Exploitation Flick goes to
Sandra and Olga in My Nights with Susan, Sandra, Olga, and Julie.
Most Creative Use of Undergarments to Communicate a Plot Point goes to
The Stepford Wives.
Best Name for a Pet in a Feature Film goes to
Yes, of course it is.
The Iger Sanction.
Most Oddly Specific Reason for a Crime, especially in a 1975 film, goes to
Right away, Sonny wanted to get me money for the sex change operation, but where was he going to get it?
Dog Day Afternoon.
Is there any special country you want to go to?
Worst geography gaffe by a character in a feature film goes to
Wyoming.
Also Dog Day Afternoon.
And the longest sustained sequence of melting faces in a feature film goes to
The Devil's Reign.
And now we come to that most coveted and esteemed ranking, the top 5 movies of 1975 as judged by me.
Number 5.
Stop that, stop that!
So as I looked at my list, I realized I forgot to mention Barry Lyndon. It's not in my top 5, but I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention it. It's good, it's Kubrick, it's beautifully shot, it's the unexpected rise and fall story of a self-made noble. It's a bit slow, and for the first half, it keeps the viewer at an emotional distance a little bit too much. But the second half, I became more invested, and I was impressed by the climactic duel that really takes its time.
Is your pistol cocked, Mr. Lyndon? Yes.
It's definitely a relevant film for the year, but it doesn't make my ranking because it doesn't live in my head like the others. So, let's start that again.
Number 5.
Stop that, stop that!
Shit. So as I was editing this video, I realized I screwed up. For some reason, I had Monty Python and the Holy Grail listed in my spreadsheet as 1974 rather than 1975.
Big mistake.
This is bar none my favorite comedy of the year.
Look, my liege!
Camelot. 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 It's only a model.
It combines the high brow and the low brow, though it's certainly weighted to the low.
Ah, blow my nose at you, so-called Arthur King. You and all your silly English kniggets.
But it's the constant jabs to religion and tradition that I really love.
And Saint Attila raised the hand grenade up on high, saying, O Lord, bless this thy hand grenade, that with it thou mayst blow thine enemies to tiny bits in thy mercy.
It probably should be in my top 5, but it's a little dicey. And besides, now I've got a haircut, I can't exactly splice myself into the older footage. And now even my Clerks 37 reference is no longer legitimate, since Holy Grail makes 38 movies. And sure, I could lie to you and say that it's still just 37 movies, but that's no way to start a good, meaningful relationship. I want you to know that I will always be honest and true with you. Anyway, back to it. For real this time.
Number 5. 3 Days of the Condor.
Yes, it's Robert Redford on the run, caught in a conspiracy he doesn't understand. Classic 70s thriller, and it's my number 5 for the year.
Number 4.
I want to know what it's all about.
Night Moves.
What it's all about.
You. What the hell are you all about?
Gene Hackman kills it as the PI who misses all the clues. This is what neo-noir is all about.
Number 3. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Well, here's a movie we haven't talked about yet. Is this Jack Nicholson's greatest performance? Possibly. Is Nurse Ratched Hollywood's greatest femme fatale who kills through suffocation rather than seduction?
Close the window and lock the screen.
Possibly. Like Mandingo, this is a story about people caught in a poisoned and corrupt institution.
I'm talking about God, the devil, hell, heaven. Do you understand? Finally!
Yeah, Hardy, you're so dumb, I can't believe it.
But unlike that more difficult film, here we get a fun and spirited rebel who jockeys against the rules and mocks the authorities. Nicholson's McMurphy isn't perfect.
She told me she was 18 and she was very willing.
But he's a regular guy who's trying to get by and calls it like it is. His tragic mistake is thinking that the nut house will be an easier place to ride out his sentence than a prison cell. And so he pretends to be cuckoo. It's an entertaining battle of wills between Nicholson and Louise Fletcher. And Nicholson's spunk and confidence starts to inspire some rebellion in some of the other patients. But as Brad Pitt doesn't quite tell Harrison Ford in The Devil's Own, don't look for a happy ending, Tom. It's not an 80s story. It's a 70s one. The movie's one detail that keeps it out of my top 2 spots comes near the end. Nicholson has found a way to escape. He's all set to go. But first, he decides to have a going-away party with the fellas. And then... What? He falls asleep? Come on. Either the character didn't actually want to escape, or this is some writer's anti-plot armor. But it does set up for one of the great tragic endings of the year, so I can't fault it too much.
Number 2.
We're moving right along, folks. We're gonna get this thing done in half an hour.
Dog Day Afternoon.
Oh my God, Dog Day Afternoon. I love this movie. Al Pacino is so relatable, despite his very different personal life choices, as the not-so-expert bank robber who gets in over his head.
Trip the alarm? Use the spot key?
He thinks he's smart.
No, not all of it.
He thinks he knows all the angles.
Look, I worked in a bank. I know the alarms.
But then a small mistake, and it all goes up in smoke. Based on a true story, this isn't just a crime story. It's also one of the earlier explorations of how the media can change an event in real time and how the right spectacle can turn anyone into a mini celebrity. By the middle of the movie, even though he's holed up with about a dozen hostages, Pacino's Sonny is shouting the progressive slogans of the era and the crowd is cheering him on. But as the movie continues, the crowd's loyalty shifts and we start to see some holes in the facade.
He would fly into these rages.
He's a loose cannon with a violent, abusive history.
I'm a Catholic and I don't want to hurt anybody, understand?
We shouldn't be rooting for this guy. He needs to go down for his actions. And the ending is quite satisfying, if not exactly happy.
See, I'm with a guy who don't know where Wyoming is. You think you got problems?
Interesting postscript. Frank Pearson, the writer of the movie, he was a mentor at my film school. His job was to screen and critique the films we made in front of our full class of 100 people. So one day I'm up on stage in the hot seat as the director of a Hemingway short story, A Clean, Well-Lighted Place. And we screen it, and the lights come up, and Frank announces to the full auditorium something along the lines of, "Before today, I didn't think it was possible for anyone to make Hemingway boring. But you succeeded, Jave." So yeah, that was fun.
And number 1.
Drum roll.
Jaws.
Well, come on, we couldn't get through 1975 without talking about Jaws. Spielberg's breakout hit, the top-grossing film of the year, history's first modern blockbuster. Everyone knows and loves Jaws. It's interesting to note that it breaks pretty much every 1975 rule. Sure, there's a bit of institutional corruption with the obstinate mayor, but even he admits his mistake by the middle of the movie. The bad guy isn't a system, or a government, or a conspiracy. It's monstrous nature. There are tons of videos on YouTube that analyze Jaws, and a lot of them are really good. Spielberg is a master of blocking and one-shots, as he proved again and again in the years to come. I'll point out only 3 things here. 1. The scene where the woman confronts Scheider and blasts him for keeping the shark a secret and getting her son killed.
You knew all those things. But still, my boy is dead now.
I've seen this movie 20, 25 times, and that scene still makes me tear up.
Some moray eel. Bit right through my wetsuit.
2. The conversation on the boat between the up till then antagonistic Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw.
That's the Thresher. You see that? Chief Thresher's tail. Thresher?
It starts as a fun, semi-intoxicated competition of bodily scars and ends in probably the best monologue of the year, where Shaw recounts his horrific experience on the USS Indianapolis.
Well, he'd been bitten in half below the waist.
And 3, the masterful setup and payoff of Chekhov's air tanks.
What are you, some kind of half-ass astronaut?
They're first introduced by Dreyfuss as he brings them on board, and Shaw mocks them and Dreyfuss's whole approach. Then a bit later, Scheider, he's clumsy, he's not used to seafaring.
You screw around with these tanks and they're gonna blow up!
And finally, in the climax of the film, the shark has eaten one of the tanks, and Scheider is sinking, soon to be the shark's next meal, but he sees the tank, takes aim, and
Fire, you son of a...
boom. And in so many other movies, the hero is saved by this Deus Ex Machina prop that shows up out of nowhere. But here in Jaws, it's set up with such conscious, meticulous precision. It's beautiful. So that's it. That is the year in movies, 1975. As you can see, my top 5 doesn't stray too far from the Academy Award Best Picture nominees or the top grossing films of the year. I predict that will be fairly rare in the years to come. So, what do you think? What are your top 5 for the year? Did I miss anything big? This is my first video in what I plan to be an exploration of film history through the perspective of my own tastes and biases. It's a small channel, so any like, subscribe, or comment you make could be a big help. See, the YouTube algorithm, it's a bit like Nurse Ratched, in that it's always out there looking to stifle and suffocate the little guy. And you don't want Nurse Ratched to win, do you? Well, do you?